The Wisconsin Badgers football team made an under the radar hire that could pay big dividends for their coaching staff going forward.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Excited to have you here today. We're talking about those three new coaching assistants that the Badgers were able to hire. We're going to talk about Tuff Borland, Joe Ludwig, but first we are starting with Blake Roland. We're going to get into him in a second. I want to big picture this. If you haven't been following for the last couple of years, or you don't follow it really closely, the NCAA used to set a certain limit on coaches. You can only have this many, right? Well, all that's gone. You can now have as many kind of on-field assistants as possible as you want. All the major programs are doing this. The Badgers are as well. That's a good thing. The Badgers are keeping up with the Joneses in this aspect. It's a very good thing. What this allows you to do is bring more coaching assistants into your field, allow them to work with more players, and it allows you to, evaluate some younger coaches, because those coaches, and we saw with Jack Cooper, those in-program assistants, those guys that are analysts, those guys that are assistants at the linebacker spot, receiver spot, safety spot, they can be moved into the full-time spot. That's what they did with Cooper this offseason, moving him in to fill the spot that Grinch had. So it allows you to evaluate. It's almost like a minor league for coaches in a sense. You can get them into your program. You can see how they work with your chemistry, how they work with your players, and then they become internal fits when somebody moves on. It becomes a bit of a feeder program, which I think is fantastic. The other thing it allows you to do is partition off some of the responsibilities. So you have Guyton coming in to coach quarterbacks right now. Well, you bring in, and we're going to talk about Blake Roland first. Blake Roland is such an underrated hire. Let's talk about the first one. So there's three guys here we're going to talk about. The first one is Blake Roland. I just love this hire. This is a guy, he could have been hired as the quarterback's coach, and a lot of people wouldn't have blinked an eye. He could have been hired as a receivers coach, and a lot of people wouldn't have blinked an eye. Listen to the resume from Blake Roland here. He's been a grad assistant at Auburn. He's been a running backs coach at West Virginia, quality control at Tennessee, 4 years as a receivers coach at the University of Cincinnati. He's been an offensive analyst at Kentucky. So Kentucky, Tennessee, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Auburn. And since 2018, he's been the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. This is super key. Super key. Offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at SIU. He's coached Cordell Patterson, Justin Hunter, Derek Rogers, a bunch of NFL receivers. But essentially what you're bringing in, he's coming in as the assistant receivers coach. Okay, so let's start there. He has background there. He has history there. He's coached a lot of NFL guys. So he's coming in as the assistant receivers coach. But again, he has experience as a quarterbacks coach, as an offensive coordinator. He has experience as a running backs coach. He can give you, this is a coach you can bring in. And then if you lose a receivers coach, a running backs coach, and you like what Blake Roland brings to the program, he can step into those roles. But bigger picture, I think what this is doing is it's giving Coach Kenny Guyton, who's never coached quarterbacks, an experienced guy there that he can lean on. This is giving him some experience in that room. This is giving Luke Fickell and Coach Grimes, offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes, a really seasoned, experienced offensive coach that can contribute in a ton of ways. Because I've been on staffs where you have somebody who's just really good at a lot of things. And they can, maybe this is their official title, and his official title is assistant receivers coach. He can help out. He can put eyes on the quarterbacks. He can be an assistant to Guyton unofficially. He can help look at the offense with Grimes. He can help look at the running backs with Spalding because he's coached that position at West Virginia. He can help look at the receivers, right? With Reed, all these new coaches that you brought in, and now you brought in this experienced guy that has experience across all these facets. I think it's a tremendous hire, and it wouldn't surprise me in 2 or 3 years. Maybe Kenny Guyton is a fast mover, right? Maybe he's excellent at the quarterback side and he moves on. This could just be a guy that's your next quarterbacks coach, and you already have him in staff, and now he's gotten used to the culture. He's gotten used to working with Luke Fickell and Jeff Grimes, and it's not a big deal. You've given yourself internal flexibility at a lot of spots with this hire. This is a guy, if they had hired him as a quarterbacks coach, he's been a quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator for the last 4 years, and SIU has put up some pretty good offenses. I don't think people would have batted an eye. It makes so much sense to bring him in with a first-time quarterback coaching Kenny Guyton. Now you have a guy who has experience there. But he also experienced at a receiver coach. And you're bringing in Reed. Jordan Reed is not the most experienced receivers coach. Now you're bringing in a guy who's coached it for 4 years at Cincinnati. This is such an underrated move. I think it's a tremendous hire. I'm surprised they were able to get him as an assistant receivers position, not even the primary guy. But again, I think it speaks to the fact that coaches want to move up, and being on the staff in a Big Ten program, especially one with the pedigree of Wisconsin, it just kind of means more than being an offensive coordinator at a lower level of football. So he's able to move up to the Big Ten level. You're able to get that guy with a ton of experience across a bunch of different positions on the staff. I love this move. I think it's an absolute home run addition. And it's one of the biggest, to me, it's one of the most underrated moves of the offseason, because I wanted to do a show on this the other day, but we had the basketball game to react to with the Gophers, and I didn't want to do 2 shows in a day. But I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this, because I think he's a guy that's brought in to help augment the experience of a lot of younger coaches that you have on the staff. And he's a guy that everybody can go to. Like literally everybody on the offensive side. I was doing some research on him. I was watching some film. He was discussing on YouTube. He had an interview a year or two ago. He was talking about the SIU offense, and he was talking about big picture. How they're planning out when to go for 2. What kind of analytics they use to determine I'm going to go for 2 here and I'm going to go to 1 here. And he said, typically at SIU, he said we lean aggressive. We go for the throat kind of. He didn't say that, but he said we go for the win. We're not trying to play for the tie. So you're bringing in a guy just from that aspect that's used as an offensive coordinator to thinking about the bigger picture of it. And he also has positional experience everywhere. He's had recruiting experience in the Southeast. He's had recruiting experience in the Midwest. Like, you're not going to get better as like your second receivers coach. That's a tremendous hire. And does it move the needle this year? Probably not. This isn't something that, the Badgers, suddenly Vegas is going to increase the win-loss by 1.5 on them. But I'm telling you, this feels like a really nice addition from a coaching experience standpoint. And in addition, going forward 3 or 4 years, it wouldn't shock me if he's a positional coach, the main positional coach at like 1 of 3 different spots on this Badger staff. So I love this hire. I absolutely love this hire. We're going to take a quick second there, get your comments, and then we're going to come back with a name that's super familiar to Badger fans. Let's talk about who else the Badgers have added onto this coaching staff and what they bring to it. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at TurboTax. It's getting to be tax season. TurboTax is such a relief. Like, it's such just a weight off your shoulders. If we've all been used to the endless waiting, the stress, the anxiety, the worry about taxes, what form to fill in, what checks box to hit, what you can write off. Sure, I can write that off. No, I can't. I don't know. The 2 voices in my head are arguing back and forth. TurboTax takes all that off your plate. You don't got to stress it. You can stress the other things, like, did I overcook that steak? And in my case, yes, I did. But TurboTax doesn't have to be on your list of stresses. TurboTax makes sure that your taxes aren't complicated. They're not stressful. They're here to change the game by matching with a TurboTax expert who can get you, your returns and get to work on your returns right away. And they treat your returns like theirs, because this is what they do. They're the pros in this industry. Real-time updates on your progress. So you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger. You have peace of mind knowing your taxes are handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and get the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today. Get matched with your expert who's ready to take the taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only on the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Today's episode also brought to you by our incredible friends over at Gametime. Gametime's awesome. I'm actually using Gametime pretty soon. I think me and my fam are going to the Nebraska home game for the Badgers, and I'm on Gametime. I'm checking out tickets. You get great seats, you get great prices, you get great inventory, and it's not just sports. I've talked about it. If you want to go anywhere to any type of event, concerts, music, whatever it is, comedy shows, use Gametime to get there. Gametime will make it faster. They'll make it easier. They'll make it cheaper. Wow, what are you doing going anywhere else? Right now, over at Gametime, download the Gametime app. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Create the account. Use code LOCKEDON-COLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. The terms apply. Again, create the account. Redeem code LOCKEDON-COLLEGE for $20 off. Okay, let's come back into this show here, and let's talk about the other names coming in. But first, let's hit a couple of these comments here. Jackson Taylor says part 2. Yeah, so if you were with me on the aborted first attempt of this show, which lasted like 37 seconds, my dog started losing her mind, and so I had to go knock that off, because otherwise the show would have been intolerable. My dog barks at everything. I love her to death. She's a great family dog, but she barks at everything. Zach Bart says, thought Roland was going to help KG coach the quarterback. Sounds like he'll be spending time with the receivers. Still like all 3 hires and analyst roles. Yeah, like officially he's a receivers coach, but I'm telling you, there's going to be I'm reading between the lines. Like you have a first-time quarterbacks coach, and then you have a guy who's been coaching that spot for 4 or 5 years. I just think there's going to be conversations just naturally. It's like if you bring in, if you bring in a really talented carpenter, right? And his job is coming into maybe frame out rooms. That's what you're hiring him for. But he has a ton of experience as a carpenter. He's had 20 years in the profession. The last 5 years, he's been doing concrete. You're still going to ask him those other questions that come up because he has a wealth of experience. Like you're going to dive into the well if it's there. You'd be silly not to. So I have no doubt that he's going to have it be a resource. He's going to provide feedback. He's going to see the quarterbacks because he's working with the receivers. He's going to have a firsthand view of those quarterbacks. I'd be stunned if there wasn't conversations between Guyton and Roland. What did you see? Oh, I saw this, and maybe tweak that a little bit. I think it's a huge hire for Guyton. But again, he's coming in to work with the receivers, and the new receivers coach Jordan Reed doesn't have a ton of experience either. I think you're augmenting both spots. I think you're backfilling both spots with experience that neither has. So now you're getting the younger coaches in there that I think are going to be better recruiters, and you're backfilling them on the back end. With a guy that has a ton of experience and has seen a lot of things. I just think it makes so much sense. Sean Campbell says, love these hires. Dean Storm says, they're being aggressive with the coaching hires, just like the portal. They definitely see where the deficiencies were and trying to rectify the problems. I give Coach Luke Fickell a lot of credit. Yeah, I'd love these 3 additions they've added. All right, let's get into the next 2 quick and then finish up within your comments. Let's talk Joe Ludwig. If that name is familiar, obviously he's the son of Andy Ludwig, who was the Badgers offensive coordinator for 13-14. So he was here for a couple years. Most recently with Utah is Andy Ludwig, although I think he just stepped down this last year. But Joe himself has played. He played at Iowa. He's been with Baylor. He's coming in as the assistant tight ends coach, which that's a spot again. There hasn't been a ton of production there, so he can help Coach Letton out, develop some of those young guys. Grant Steck is obviously somebody I think is really, really talented and has a future. I also just kind of like bringing in somebody that had a bit of a Wisconsin connection, although Ludwig really wasn't here that long. But I think that's never a bad thing. And the other one is Tuff Borland. Tuff Borland played at Ohio State. This is an interesting one to me for just kind of a bit of a random reason. The Badgers were in on that recruitment when Tuff Borland was originally deciding where to go. The Badgers were considered one of the early front runners. He would eventually go to Ohio State, played on some great Ohio State teams. There was a productive linebacker. I think it's interesting because he had a firsthand view of being recruited in Wisconsin and Ohio State. Like that's something that he can leverage a little bit in helping the coaches recruit to Wisconsin, right? Because he was in that battle and ended up not coming to Wisconsin. Well, why didn't you? What could we have done different? How can we better sell Wisconsin? Like he is kind of that perspective of being recruited by Wisconsin, but going to a blue blood. Now he's back at Wisconsin. And he also has tremendous championship experience, like playing at those Ohio State teams. He's going to bring that level of this is what it takes into the room. So he's going to be coming in as the assistant linebackers coach. This is one that I find really interesting too, because who was coaching linebackers last year? You had Mitchell coming in, Matt Mitchell coming in from a lower level where he had to do everything. And then you had Tressel. And what were one of the complaints we had? How did we best utilize the linebacker room? And I don't think we did. I think a lot of people would agree we didn't. So let's get another voice in there elevated. Tuff has been with the program for a while as a graduate assistant, but now let's give him some responsibility, a bit of a voice. Let's elevate that role. And maybe we can then move Tressel a little bit out of coaching the day-to-day linebackers. You go be a DC. You go do a better job of scheming up, getting pressure, getting TFLs. We got the coaching on this side. Between Mitchell and between Borland, we got this. We got the day-to-day. We'll run through the drills. We'll get the kids better. We'll get them better. We'll elevate their play. You worry more about the big picture DC stuff now because there's not a limit on coaches anymore. So let's get our DC and to some degree our offensive coordinator as well, but let's get our defensive coordinator who, again, I thought this was a defense that underperformed last year. We talked about some of the statistics. Let's let him focus on the big picture. Tuff and Mitchell can coach up the linebackers. That's why I think that Borland hire makes sense because maybe you can take some of that off of Tressel's plate and maybe he can be more of the big picture guy now. And I think as DC, you kind of need that. A couple more things here. Marty Griffin. Marty Griffin's a good dude, man. It feels like we're on the up and up with Guyton. I'm excited. Guyton has a lot of upside as a coach. I really firmly believe that. Even though, like, I'm going to be fair here, he wasn't my number one choice. Just because I wanted somebody with experience. Now I'll say this: I feel a lot better now. Like, and maybe this was the plan all along, and I'm a fool for getting too frustrated too early. Not the first time I've been a fool of people who watch this show would tell you that. I feel a lot better now because now there's a guy in that room with a lot of experience that Guyton can lean on if he has to. But I do agree with you, Marty. I think Guyton has a high upside. I think he can recruit. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's played the position. There's certainly a world where he's a fast riser in the coaching profession, and that can absolutely work. Dominic says, I feel like Ryan's hair never grows and he never gets a haircut either. I was literally talking today, Dominic, about getting a haircut. So I do need to do that, but appreciate it. JB says, who? We're talking about the new coaching hires, JB. Blake Roland, Tuff Borland, and Joe Ludwig. As always, appreciate that you're here, though, JB. Keith asks, have we ever seen your dog? I think, yes. The dog has made an appearance back in the stairway over behind me, right there. Occasionally, you'll see her come down the stairs. She is a great Pyrenees / lab, phenomenal family dog, like awesome, but she just barks. And that doesn't work well for audio on an audio show. And last one here, Ryan Willie says, Xavier Lucas' situation is going to hurt trying to recruit. I think it is. I've made that point. How much? I don't know if it's going to make a big deal. I do think there's going to be teams that use it against us, and it is what it is. At this point, Wisconsin has decided to stand on their take, and I don't fault them for that whatsoever. Like at all. I think the fact that this is the only recruit they've done that with tells you that something went wrong on the Xavier Lucas camp of this, and they're going to see that through. And they have the right to do that if they feel wronged by it. The national perception, the PR, people are going to run with the story a little bit because the Wisconsin is holding a guy hostage tagline sells clickbait a lot easier than the Wisconsin is trying to reach a fair resolution with a prospect that reneged on a deal headline. That one doesn't generate as many clicks. And quite frankly, and sadly, and I try to never do this on my show. I think I do a pretty good job of not being a clickbait type of a host. But quite frankly, we live in a world where clickbait sells. So you're going to have some bad PR on it just because nationally the headline of Wisconsin holding a guy hostage is so sensationalist that it's easy to click on. It's easy to get people to engage in that type of content. But I think we know here internally that that's not what Wisconsin's doing. They don't hold people hostage. They've lost 40 guys in the portal last couple seasons. We've rehashed all this. So I think what they're doing is fine. But I do think at instant recruits, it'll hit them. It'll ding them up a little bit. Jackson Taylor says, who's your favorite analyst hire? Of these three, it's Blake Roland. I think Blake Roland's a home run hire. I think with his experience to get him coming in as like a secondary receivers coach, it makes me think, and this is me reading between the lines, it makes me think that there's some type of promise there. Like, I think in a couple of years, you might have an elevated role here type of thing. Because that's a guy with a ton of experience and has had successful experience coming in to coach as the second receivers coach, which again tells me he's the receivers coach. And I don't know why I did air quotes there, right? He is going to help his receivers. Absolutely. But I think he's helping in a lot of spots, and receivers coach is just the title stamped on there. It's like, the guy who can do everything. You got to give him some type of title. We're going to call you this guy, but you're going to help in a few spots. And I think that's what's going to happen. A couple of things here. JB says, don't cut your hair. Grow it up. Ryanada says, did you get a chance to watch the All-American Bowl? Clayton was awesome. I saw snippets of it, and then I saw some highlights of his clipped up on Twitter. He's a dude. Like he was in my top, I think 3 or 4 when I did my big board prospect list of everybody we signed. I think behind maybe Smith and Posa, he might have been 3rd. I'd have to go back and look. He's really good. I think there's a chance he plays this year. I've talked to national recruiting analysts who absolutely love him, Rivals and 247. I think he's an absolute dude. Yeah, I love that guy. L Mills says, Ryan, give us your rapid fire CFP analysis. I mean, it's hard to go against Ohio State, and I'm obviously rooting for the Big Ten here. I do think Ohio State needs to be a little careful. Will Howard needs to be a little careful. He wasn't quite as sharp in that game, but I think they have too much, and I don't think Notre Dame's going to hang with them. But we'll see. I'm also certainly rooting for Ohio State, as weird as that sounds for me to even say. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. This one's good because Zach Bart's watches film. Gosh. And he knows ball. So Clayton has some Zach Bond speed off the edge. I agree with him. And if you ever see Zach out there and hear his takes, this is a guy who backs it up by watching film, knows ball. And I agree with him on this. I think Clayton has Bond type burst. He's a bit of a longer body, so he has to operate with a little bit more finesse at times. But I think because of that longer body, he's going to be a little more versatile as well. He's going to be able to get in some passing lanes, deflect some passes. He's really good. Really, really, really good. Okay, let's wrap it there. on Wisconsin as always. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest news stories over on the Big Ten channel. Obviously, big stuff happening this week with the playoffs going on, and Ohio State still in it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on Wisconsin, and we will talk tomorrow. I think Nick Goson's coming up tomorrow. That'll be a fun one. All right, later.